So our third snippet for this week looks at the Obama years outside of social issues, where Obama's record was really quite mixed. Obama had campaigned in 2008 as a strong opponent of the Bush national security state, about Bush national security approaches in constitutional affairs, and promised to close the Guantanamo Bay facility. And yet it doesn't get closed while the Democrats retain full control of Congress in 2009 and 2010, and then it's blocked by Congress thereafter. Obama also is aggressive, arguably more aggressive than the Bush administration was in expanding the authority granted to the president by the authorization to use force in Afghanistan, which had said the United States could act to defend against al-Qaeda, to other parts of the world. So, for instance, in Yemen, a country at the southern fringe of the Arabian Peninsula, that by the early Obama years is devolving into something of a failed state. That is, the central government is losing control. There's a group of rebels that are backed by the Iranians. There's a quite strong presence of a radical terrorist group called Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, which has as its chief propagandist Anwar al-Awlaki this joint he holds a joint citizenship between the United States and Yemen. So he is an American citizen. He's in Yemen. He's doing broadcasts in English, very effective propaganda broadcasts against the United States. Obama had authorized U.S. drone strikes in Yemen, targeting against Al Qaeda operatives there, and authorizes a drone strike that kills al-Awlaki, also kills his son, and becomes a major constitutional issue. Does the president have the authority to authorize a drone strike against a U.S. citizen abroad if the president concludes that that person is violating, is fighting against the United States? And the ACLU sues, and they get the legal memo from the Office of Legal Counsel released that says that there was a legal justification for this, and as with many such things, there are arguments on both sides. The striking thing here, though, was that Obama, who had campaigned very aggressively as a strong civil libertarian on these questions, governs far less so. And we see this in the highest profile example with his continuation of a Bush-era interpretation of the Patriot Act, and the ability of the National Security Agency, the NSA. The original joke was that the NSA stood for no such agency, because in the early stages of the Cold War, there was no acknowledgement that this electronic intelligence spy agency existed. The NSA was had obtained warrants that allowed them to monitor the cell phone records of all American citizens. And this material gets leaked by an NSA contractor named Edward Snowden, who leaks it to a series of operatives, the most famous of whom is a journalist named Glenn Greenwald, who then wrote for The Guardian, later goes on to write for The Intercept, and now has his own website, a site called Substack. And sort of exposes what they see as excesses in the war on terror. Greenwald, this is old hat for Greenwald. He had been a civil liberties opponent of the Bush war on terror policy. He's a critic of Obama's policy. He's critical of aspects of Trump's policy. He's been critical of aspects of Biden's. Snowden, I think, is a trickier case. Snowden flees to Russia, where he still resides, in the aftermath of his heist of NSA documents. A lot of the stuff that he releases seems not really civil liberties related, but just sort of targeting the NSA's activities abroad more generally. His story is that he is fleeing. He wants to get exiled, and he was in Hawaii when he stole the documents. He wants to go into exile in Ecuador, which then had a leftist, populist, anti-American president. But generally, the fastest way from Hawaii to Ecuador is not through Moscow. And whether he had contact with Russian operatives before he did what he did, or whether the Russians sort of conveniently take advantage of it, I don't know that we'll ever know. But in any case, the material is released. It's deeply embarrassing for Obama, and the key point here is that Obama seems to be just as aggressive in terms of civil liberties concerns with regards to the war on terror as Bush was. And by this point in the course, you probably should have gotten my take on this, which is that presidents rarely give back power, even if they didn't like how their predecessors might have obtained it. Now, the other big issue, I think, sort of in sort of national politics and constitution during the Obama years, deals with voting rights. Obama gets to nominate 2 justices to the Supreme Court, Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan. This is part of a broader diversity push by the Obama administration in the federal judiciary, not just women, but judges of color. Sotomayor becomes the first Hispanic justice on the Supreme Court. But they replace fellow liberals. So the Sotomayor and Kagan appointments do not change the ideological composition of the court. Justice Kennedy remains the swing vote. And throughout the Obama years, there are a series of tough political fights where generally the Democrats are on the losing side. After the 2010 elections, as some of you might have seen, I'm filming this on Monday. The count for the current census and redistricting was just released this afternoon. The 2010 count was a tough one for the Democrats because there were a number of states, all of these states that I have here in red, which were swingy states. That is, that they were fairly closely divided between Republicans and Democrats, but Republicans had taken full control of these states by the 2010 midterm elections. So in all of these states, the Republicans drew pretty ruthless gerrymanders. That is, they drew the lines to maximize Republican representation, which helps the Republicans take control of the House in 2010. You can get a sense of what they're doing here in North Carolina. So the top map is the North Carolina districting pre-2010 redistricting. The bottom is post-redistricting. Take a look right here at the 4th district. So the 4th district is based in Durham, Chapel Hill, University District, very, very, very liberal area. So the 4th district is redrawn, and take a look at the new 4th that sort of snakes through areas in central North Carolina. It becomes an overwhelmingly African-American district, but these surrounding districts, the 2nd and the 6th, which were previously pretty strong Democratic districts, because they lose the black vote, these districts become Republican. So, both sides are ruthless in gerrymandering, but the 2010 maps work out in such a way that the Republicans are able to take some advantage. Also, and this is, I think, a legacy of Bush versus Gore, where both parties are trying to game the system as much as they can to get advantage. States start adopting photo ID policies. That is, that you have to be able to show your photo ID to be able to vote. You'll note that Maine is one of the gray states. When I vote, I do not need to show my photo ID. By and large, the photo ID policies are passed by red or purple states where the Republicans are controlling the state legislature. Republicans say that it's for reasons of ballot integrity to ensure that someone doesn't show up and fraudulently vote on your behalf. The Democrats say that this is designed to, suppress the vote. Both of these are really hyperbolic arguments, I think. But in effect, the sense is that even if it only means a few thousand votes or a few hundred votes that might affect it, that might swing an election. The Supreme Court upholds the constitutionality of voter ID laws. And the other big election law issue of the Obama years was the Voting Rights Act. So remember, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. Among its provisions was Section 5. Which said that in any state that had a covered jurisdiction, that basically meant any state, which are red on this map, or county, which is blue on this map, any of these areas where there was a documented record of discrimination based on a statistical formula as of passage of the act in 1965, that if they wanted to change their voting rules in any way at all, they had to get approval either from a 3-judge court of federal judges or from the U.S. Justice Department. And that made it, the idea was to, to make it more, the supporters of this said that it was to make it more difficult for these states to return to discrimination. The opponents of this said that this was an unfair procedure, and conservatives strongly opposed it. This case, this challenge to Section 5 works its way to the Supreme Court in a case called Shelby County versus Holder. And you get a sense that the argument is not going well when Chief Justice Roberts is pressing the Obama Solicitor General, Donald Verrilli, about his claims that we need to uphold Section 5 of the law.
The covered jurisdictions contain only 14% of the sub-jurisdictions in the nation, and so 14% of the sub-jurisdictions in the nation are generating up to 81% of the successful Section 2 litigation.
And General, is it the government's submission that the citizens in the South are more racist than citizens in the North?
It is not, and I do not know the answer to that, Your Honor, but I do think it was reasonable for
Congress. Which you said it is not, and you don't know the answer to it.
It's not our submission. As an objective matter, I don't know the answer to that question.
This is a pretty hostile question from Roberts. You get a sense here that he's basically saying, look, you're setting up this system where the southern states have to operate under more stringent rules than the northern states will, and the Supreme Court strikes down Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. In the aftermath of this, states start to tighten up voting policy. So this is the map before the Shelby County decision. The darker the state, the more restrictive voting rules. Here's the map afterwards. And again, you can debate the merits of these policies one way or the other. And I think that the effect of these policies, frankly, is overstated by both sides. But the trend here is a clear-cut trend, which is that after Shelby County, it becomes more difficult to vote in a number of states. And that is our third snippet for this week.